This year, it's immediate family only. The text landed while I was ironing a shirt for the trip I'd booked off work for months. 10 minutes later, my sister texted asking me to watch all 5 of her kids so she and my brother could still go in my place. That night, an email from Mom's lawyer hit my inbox. A new will, one that cut me out clean as a knife. My name is Angela Ortiz. I am 31 years old, and I live in Columbus, Ohio. I am a project manager at Northbridge and Lane, a marketing firm that moves too fast and pays just well enough to justify the hours. I'm good at my job. I manage timelines, expectations, and budgets. I turn chaos into checklists. For the last 2 months, I have been managing the launch of the new Avra platform, a nightmare of shifting client demands and buggy code. I worked 2 weekends in a row, lived on takeout coffee, and pulled a 70-hour week to get it across the finish line 2 days early. I did it for one reason: my mother's 66th birthday. I had cleared my calendar. I submitted my paid time off request 8 weeks in advance. I booked a flight to Toledo, non-refundable, and a rental car. I even coordinated with my assistant to ensure every single one of my projects had a detailed contingency plan. My out-of-office message was drafted. My suitcase, a sleek black carry-on I'd bought myself after my last promotion, was packed. It sat by my front door, a monument to my efficiency. I was ironing a linen blouse, a nice cream-colored one I'd planned to wear for the birthday dinner, when my phone buzzed on the edge of the ironing board. The iron hissed as I lifted it, the smell of hot cotton and lavender water filling my quiet apartment. The text was from my older sister, Mara. "Hey, Mom and I were talking. We're trying to keep the trip really small this year, so we decided on immediate family only." I read it twice. The iron, heavy in my hand, grew cold. Immediate family only. A phrase. Just 4 words. But in our family, it was a scalpel, used to precisely cut me away from the body. Immediate family was a flexible term. It meant Mara, her husband, and their 3 children. It meant my younger brother Evan, his wife Lena, and their 2 children. It meant my mother. It did not, apparently, mean me. I set the iron down in its cradle. The blouse was still wrinkled on one sleeve. I looked at the words again, the polite, dismissive cruelty of it. We decided, not Mom decided, the United Front. The phrase was a gate, slammed shut and locked. I was the and in Mara and Evan and Angela, the outlier, the one who lived alone 2 hours away in Columbus, the one without a spouse, the one without children, the one, therefore, who was not immediate. I didn't have time to text back. I didn't have time to even process the hot, familiar sting of it. My phone rang, the screen lighting up with Evan's name. It had been, by my clock, maybe 10 minutes, just long enough for them to coordinate their attack. First the bad news from Mara, then the follow-up from Evan. I stared at the screen, at the smiling picture of him with his arm around Lena, a picture I had taken. I let it ring 3 times before answering. I kept my voice flat. "Evan." "Anj, hey, you get Mara's text?" He had that light, breezy laugh in his voice, the one he used when he was about to ask for something unreasonable, the one that said this isn't a big deal to me, so it shouldn't be to you. "I just got it," I said. Great. So, look, we're all still going, obviously, but listen, since you're not coming on the trip now, we were really hoping you could watch the kids." I held the phone away from my ear for a second, just to look at it, to confirm the world had, in fact, tilted off its axis. He was not joking. The silence stretched. "Anj, you there? You're asking me to babysit?" "Yeah, it would be a huge help, all 5 of them. Mara will drop her 3 off, and I'll bring Liam and Sophie. It's just for the long weekend. Since you've got the time off already, it's perfect." Perfect. I looked at my suitcase. I looked at the plane ticket confirmation on my laptop screen. I looked at the project schedule I had bled for. "Evan," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, "you're uninviting me for Mom's birthday, and in the same breath, you're asking me to be your free, consolidated daycare." His laugh was nervous this time, Whoa, Ange. Don't say it like that. It's not us uninviting you. It's Mom. You know how she is. She just wants it to be quiet. She's been stressed. Quiet, I repeated, with 5 grandchildren under the age of 8. Well, and the kids could really use the fresh air, get out of the city, but we can't manage them and give Mom the attention she needs. We need someone we trust, and you're the best. The compliment was the little poisoned cherry on top. I was the best, most convenient, most available, most easily taken for granted option. I was the one who lived alone. I was the one whose time had no value. I'll have to get back to you, Evan, I said. My throat felt tight. Oh, okay. Well, can you let us know soon? Mara's got to finalize her plans. We're trying to leave Thursday night, the day my original flight was supposed to land. I have to go, Evan. I hung up before he could answer. My hand was shaking, not with rage, not yet, with a kind of deep, seismic tremor. The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking, unexamined selfishness of it all. They hadn't just excluded me. They had replaced me with a job. They had looked at my cleared schedule, the time I had carved out for our mother, and seen not a loving daughter, but a resource to be exploited. I stood in my living room, the blouse still on the ironing board. My apartment, usually my sanctuary, felt like a holding cell. This was the pattern. This was the role I had been cast in, the one I had been playing for 20 years. The phone rang again. I knew who it was. This was the final act, the pincer move. Mara delivered the blow. Evan laid out the new terms of my surrender. And now, Mom. Mom would be the one to apply the emotional balm, the guilt, the soft-spoken words that made it all my fault if I refused. I picked it up. Hi, Mom. Angela, honey. Her voice was soft, a little weary, the voice she used when she didn't want to fight, when she just wanted compliance. You talked to Evan? I did. Oh, good. It's all so much, my 66th. I just want it to be simple, and Evan and Mara thought it would be better, easier on everyone, if we just kept it small. Evan and Mara thought, and since you live all by yourself, she continued, her voice warming up, it's just so much more convenient. You don't have to worry about husbands or kids. Your schedule is your own. It makes you the perfect person to help out. It would be such a load off my mind to know the kids are safe with you. Convenient. The word was a prison. My independence. The life I had built for myself, project by project, paycheck by paycheck, was not seen as an accomplishment. It was seen as a vacancy, a resource to be tapped. As she spoke, the years just spooled out behind my eyes, a long, grim highlight reel of my convenience. There was the time I got the 3 a.m. call from Mara, her son Liam screaming in the background with a 104-degree fever, her husband, too drunk to drive. I drove 40 minutes across town in a rainstorm, took them to the emergency room, and sat on 2 hard plastic chairs pushed together until dawn while Mara and Liam slept on the gurney. I still went to work the next day. There was the time Evan forgot he was supposed to pick Mom up from her colonoscopy. I was in the middle of a major client presentation at Northbridge and Lane. I saw the string of panicked texts. I had to excuse myself, lie that there was a fire in my building, and race to the surgical center, where my mother was sitting alone in the recovery room, crying. Evan called later, laughing. Oh man, Ange, you're a lifesaver. It totally slipped my mind. Babysitting, dog-sitting, moving, emergency loans that were never repaid, sleeping on folding chairs at Christmas, giving up my own bed at Thanksgiving, the default sacrifice. Angela will do it. She's strong. She's independent. She doesn't mind. My mother was still talking. And it would just make my birthday so much more relaxing, knowing they're not all cooped up in the hotel. Mom, I interrupted. My voice was colder than I intended. She stopped. What, honey? I already have a flight. I have a rental car. I took a week of vacation. I finished a major project early. I did all of this so I could be there for your birthday. There was a pause, A long, heavy, terrible pause. When she spoke again, the softness was gone. It was brittle, defensive. Well, I don't know what to tell you. Angela, the plans are made. You can get a refund, can't you? That's not the point. My hands were fists now. The point is, I want to be there. I'm your daughter. Don't you want me there? It was the question, the one I had never been brave enough to ask, the one that hung in the air between us in every convenient request, every default sacrifice. The silence on the other end of the line was my answer. It was a long, hollow silence that filled my entire apartment. I could hear her breathing, a little shaky. I could hear the sound of a television in the background at her house. She was admitting it, without saying a word. She was telling me everything. My presence was not required. My utility was. Finally, she spoke, and the knife that had been pressed against my back all day was plunged in. You are being so selfish, Angela, she said, her voice sharp with a sudden, bitter anger. This is my birthday, and you're trying to make it all about you, always. Your brother and sister have families to think about. They have real responsibilities. You only have yourself. You could try thinking about someone else for a change. Selfish. The word hit me so hard, I actually sat down on the floor. Right there by the ironing board. I, who had rearranged my entire adult life to be the family's emergency contact, was selfish. I, who was currently being uninvited from a trip I had paid for, was selfish. I, who was being asked to cancel my own plans to become a free nanny, was selfish. I had nothing left to say. There was no argument I could make. The logic was circular. To want to be included was selfish. To not want to be used was selfish. My only acceptable role was to be a silent, smiling cog in their machine. I have to go, Mom, I said. My voice was a whisper. Angela, don't you hang up on me. I ended the call. I sat on the floor for a long time. The house was silent. The cream-colored blouse was still on the ironing board, half-pressed. My suitcase was still by the door. I was still a project manager. I stood up. I walked to my desk. I didn't cry. The time for that was over. This was a breach of contract. This was a failure in management. This was a problem to be documented. I opened my phone. My fingers moved with the detached precision of my job. I went to Mara's text, screenshot. I went to my call log, screenshot. I went to Evan's texts, which had started to pile up. Ange, what's the deal? Need to know. Mom said she was going to call you. Are you pouting? Don't be like this. Screenshot, screenshot, screenshot. I opened my email on my laptop. I composed a new message to myself. Subject, family. I attached the screenshots. Then I thought better of it. I deleted the draft. I went to my secure cloud drive, the one I used for work documents and personal files. I created a new folder. I didn't name it Family or Mom's Birthday. I named it, very precisely, Trip, Proof. I uploaded the screenshots one by one. I added a new file. The email confirmation for my flight. I added the confirmation for the rental car. I added the paid time off approval email from my director at Northbridge and Lane. I was building a case. I didn't know for what, but I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that this was no longer a misunderstanding. This was a transaction, and I had been on the losing end for far too long. I closed the folder. I shut down my laptop. The argument was over. The documentation had begun. This isn't new. This pattern is bone deep. Our childhood in Toledo was a 3-act play written before we were born. Mara was the first, the oldest daughter of duty. She was born responsible, forever martyred by the burden of being the eldest. Then came Evan. 4 long years later, the miracle son. He was the boy, the longed for, the one who could do no wrong, only make mistakes. He was loud, charming, and perpetually forgiven. I was the accident. I arrived just 18 months after Evan. The silent buffer. I was the middle child, the peacemaker, the afterthought. My role was simple. Be quiet, be easy, and absorb the impacts. Mara complained. Evan demanded. and I learned to need nothing. It's a dynamic that only gets more expensive as you get older. College was the proving ground. I knew the money was tight. I watched my mother stare at the kitchen calculator, her lips moving silently. So, I applied for every scholarship that existed. I wrote essays about overcoming adversity that I didn't even recognize as my own life. I got a full academic ride to Ohio State. It wasn't enough. I still worked 20 hours a week at the Thompson Library, shelving books in the silent, dusty stacks, breathing in the smell of old paper. I worked my summers at a sweltering call center, listening to people scream about their phone bills. I graduated with high honors, a job offer at Northbridge and Lane, and not a single dollar of debt. Evan went to a private liberal arts college in New England. He changed his major 4 times. He started in philosophy. To understand the world. Then he switched to business. To conquer the world. Then it was communications. Because business was too cutthroat. He finally graduated with a degree in art history. Each change required new, expensive textbooks. Each pivot was a journey of self-discovery funded by my parents. He called home every week. Stressed, confused, just trying to find himself. My mother would hang up the phone, her face etched with worry, and say, "He's just so sensitive." When Evan complained that the campus bus was unreliable, my parents co-signed a loan for a brand new, bright blue Subaru. He totaled it 6 months later, hitting a patch of black ice he didn't see. They co-signed another one. This is how the good reasons were built. The good reasons are the official, unspoken laws of the Ortiz family. They are the logic that ensures all resources, time, money, energy, and empathy flow away from me and toward my siblings. The first and most powerful good reason is, Evan has a family. From the moment his first child was born, this phrase became a magic wand, absolving him of all responsibility. Evan can't fly home for Christmas? It's too hard. Angela, Evan has a family. Evan needs to borrow $2,000 for a security deposit on a bigger apartment? You have to understand, Evan has a family. Evan can't possibly help Mom move her old sofa into the basement. His hands are full. Honey, Evan has a family. The second good reason is, Mara is so busy with the kids. Mara weaponized her stress. She wore her exhaustion like a badge of honor, and she used it to get out of everything. Mara can't drive Mom to her cardiology appointment. Angela, you do it. Mara is just so busy with the kids. Mara can't host Thanksgiving, ever. It's just too much for her. Mara is so busy with the kids. And then, there is my reason. The one for me. It is the most insidious of them all. Angela is strong. Angela is independent. Angela can handle it. Angela doesn't mind. It was never a compliment. It was a utility. It was the story they told themselves so they could justify their neglect. They praised my independence as a way to strip me of my right to have needs. They called me strong so they wouldn't have to support me. My strength was their resource. My independence was their day off. My solitude was their convenience. I wasn't a daughter or a sister. I was a structural support beam. I was the one who was, and always would be. Fine. At the holidays, the script never changed. I would drive in from Columbus. Arriving on Wednesday night, I'd be in the kitchen by 7 a.m. on Thanksgiving. Wrestling the 20-pound turkey into the roaster, I made the stuffing from scratch, the cranberry sauce, the 3 side dishes, and my grandmother's pecan pie. I did it all. Mara and Evan would arrive at 3 in the afternoon. Stuck in traffic. Kids were a nightmare. They would walk in, pour a glass of wine, and sit in the living room, laughing with Mom. They took the pictures, the candid selfies, the group shots by the fireplace. I am in almost none of them. When I do appear, I am a blur in the background, my hair pulled back, wearing an apron, holding a wooden spoon or a hot roasting pan. I was the kitchen. They were the party. Finances were a one-way street. Ange, can you front the money for Mom's new iPad from all of us? Just Venmo request us later. Ange, Can you cover the restaurant bill? Just tell us what we owe. They never paid. They never asked what they owed. If I sent the Venmo request, I was petty. I was keeping score. I was making it about money. So I stopped asking. I just absorbed it. The cost of the iPad, the $80 dinner tabs, the shared cost vacation rental I paid the deposit on, and no one remembered to chip in for. It was my tax for being single, my fee for being strong. Then, the antiques. Our grandmother, Mom's mom, had a set of beautiful, solid cherry wood end tables. She loved them. I loved them. When she passed, they were the only thing I asked for. "Oh, honey," Mom said, patting my hand. "We're just letting Evan hold on to them for now. He has so much more space in his house." I saw them a month later in his living room. One was covered in sticky juice rings from his toddler's sippy cup. The other was being used as a footstool. My one-bedroom apartment in Columbus was, apparently, too small to hold anything of value. The judgments were small, daily cuts. Must be nice to sleep in on Saturdays. What do you even do with all your free time? You're so lucky you only have to think about yourself. No kids means you're free. I am not free. I am just, to them, available. About 2 years ago, after a particularly brutal Christmas where I ended up paying for the entire family's catering and sleeping on an air mattress in the drafty basement, I did something. I am a project manager. I manage chaos. I track deliverables. I live in data. I opened a new, password-protected Excel file on my secure drive. I created a spreadsheet. It's my most private document. It has 5 columns: date, incident, time cost, financial cost, the good reason. It is the habit of a person who is tired of arguing with a stacked deck, tired of being gaslit, tired of her own memory being called into question. The entries are a logbook of my own erasure. Date, January 10th. Incident, drove Evan to the airport for his 6 a.m. flight. Time cost, 3 hours. Financial cost, $20 gas. The good reason, Mara and the kids had a rough night. Ange, you're a lifesaver. Date, March 15th. Incident, paid Mom's $700 property tax bill. She forgot. Financial cost, $700. The good reason, Evan's budget is just so tight this month. Date, July 19th. Incident, used 2 of my own vacation days to watch Mara's 3 kids while she and her husband went to a wine tasting weekend. Time cost, 48 hours. The good reason, Angela, you're the best. You're so strong. I'm just so busy. Date, December 25th. Incident, slept on folding chair. Gave up my bed for Evan. Time, cost, 8 hours. No sleep. Financial cost, 0. The good reason. Come on, Ange. He has a family. He needs the good bed. I looked at that spreadsheet just last week. The financial cost column totaled over $4,000. The time cost column was in the hundreds of hours. This was the breaking point. The text from Mara. The call from Evan. This was not just a misunderstanding. This was the final, defining entry. They weren't just asking me to babysit. They were uninviting me for my mother's birthday and then demanding that I, the selfish one, provide the free labor that would enable them to go without me. They were taking my paid vacation, my airline ticket, my rental car, my time, and my dignity, and they were converting it into their relaxing family trip. They weren't just neglecting my needs. They were actively, consciously feeding on them. I had been the silent buffer for 31 years, the shock absorber, the cushion, but a cushion. When pressed down, and pressed down, and pressed down, eventually has nothing left to give. It becomes as hard as the floor underneath it. The demand to watch 5 children, after casting me out, was not just an insult. It was the last, final, impossible weight, and something, at last, snapped. My phone was a dark rectangle on the coffee table. I had silenced it, but it still buzzed. A frantic, angry vibration against the wood. Evan, Mara, Evan again. They were texts of escalating impatience, then confusion, then accusation. I let them vibrate. I was staring at the folder on my laptop screen. Trip, proof, the screenshots, the confirmations. It was a file of evidence, but I didn't know what the crime was. Not yet. I was still sitting there, in the quiet of my living room, when my laptop chimed. It was a new email. The sender was not a family member. It was a name I had heard perhaps twice in my life. Harold Pike, Esquire. He was my mother's lawyer in Toledo, a man of dusty offices and ironclad, old-school letterhead. The subject line was cold and administrative. Updated estate planning documents, M. Ortiz. My stomach didn't drop. My heart didn't pound. I simply felt a click, like a file drawer locking into place. This was more data. I opened it. The email itself was brief, just a few lines of stiff, legal prose. To the parties listed, per the request of my client, Mildred Ortiz, for digital distribution, please find attached the fully executed copy of her revised last will and testament, dated October 17th of this year. Please review the attached document and confirm receipt. To the parties listed, my eyes shot to the CC line, Mara Collins Evan Ortiz at Angela Ortiz He had sent it to all three of us. Simultaneously, this was not a private notification. This was a public proclamation. Attached was a single file. Mildred Ortiz, will executed, PDF. I clicked, it opened. 18 pages. A wall of dense, black and white text. I am a project manager. I read contracts for a living. I read scope of work documents. I know how to find the deliverables. The first page was just a declaration. The second defined the family members. I skipped ahead. I went straight to Article 3, disposition of assets. My breath didn't catch. I just read, to my son, Evan Ortiz, I devise and bequeath all of my real property, including the family residence located at 4580 Willow Creek Drive, Dayton, Ohio, free and clear of all liens and encumbrances. The house, the home I grew up in, the only asset of real value, the one my mother had just finished paying the mortgage on last year, given to Evan. I kept reading. Further, to my son, Evan Ortiz, I devise and bequeath the entirety of my financial accounts, including all funds held in the Vanguard IRA account ending in 4511, and the full death benefit of the Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance policy. It was all of it. The retirement she had scraped together, the policy, everything. It was all Evan. It was a clean sweep. My eyes scanned the page, searching for my sister's name. I found it. To my daughter, Mara Collins, in recognition of her support as a mother, I bequeath a one-time cash sum of $15,000. $15,000, a tip, a consolation prize for not being the son. I kept scrolling. The page was turning white at the bottom. I knew what was coming. I knew it before I saw the words. I found my name, Angela Ortiz. To my daughter, Angela Ortiz, I devise and bequeath my complete personal library of books, in the hopes that she continues to find value in them. I stopped. Her books, a few hundred worn paperbacks. But there was one more line. I further bequeath to Angela my profound gratitude for the stability she has always provided to our family. Gratitude. He had written it into the will. Harold Pike had sat at his keyboard and legally itemized gratitude as my inheritance. It was listed as a bequest. It was what I got instead of the house, instead of the money, instead of the $15,000 thank you note. I was bequeathed the concept of their appreciation. It was a $0 line item. I scrolled to the last page, page 18, the signature block. My mother's signature, Mildred Ortiz, was there. A little spidery but recognizable, and the date, typed and notarized, October 17th. October 17th. My blood did not run cold. It turned to acid. I minimized the PDF. I opened my calendar. I went back 3 weeks. October 17th. I found the group text chain from that day. It was still on my phone. Mara. Mom, just called the resort. Book the block of rooms for your birthday trip. It's going to be amazing. Evan, awesome. The kids are so excited. The trip, the family trip, the immediate family-only trip. They were booking the trip and signing the will at the same time. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a coordinated action. This was the project plan. I pulled the PDF back up. The CC line, Mara. Collins Evan, Ortiz They had this document. They had received this email. They knew. When Mara texted me this morning, immediate family only, she knew she was getting $15,000. When Evan called 10 minutes later, laughing, asking me to watch all 5 of their children, he knew he was getting the house and the retirement. They knew I was getting the books and the profound gratitude. The babysitting request. It wasn't just an insult on top of an exclusion. It was a celebration. It was them pressing their foot down on my neck. It was a confirmation of my new legal status, the help, the person who gets gratitude as payment, the one who exists to provide stability while they cash the checks. I read the document again. This was the second read. The first was for shock. This one was for information. Then I read it a third time. This time, I was not a daughter. I was a project manager, and I was auditing a hostile contract. I opened the annotation tools. I turned on the yellow highlighter. I highlighted 4580 Willow Creek Drive. I highlighted Vanguard IRA. I highlighted $15,000. I highlighted Personal Library. I highlighted, in dark red, Profound Gratitude. And then, in Article 7, I found something else, something I had missed. It was a new clause, one that had nothing to do with death. It was about now. It was a springing power of attorney. In the event I, the testator, experience a period of significant emotional or mental stress, I hereby grant temporary and immediate financial power of attorney to my son, Evan Ortiz, to manage my financial affairs for my protection and to prevent undue influence. Significant emotional or mental stress. It was a trap. It was a vaguely worded, subjective trigger. It was a weapon. It meant that if I called my mother, if I screamed, if I cried, if I demanded to know what she had done, I would be the stress. I would be the undue influence. The moment I caused a problem, I would be the legal justification for Evan to seize control of her bank accounts, instantly. He had built a shield. He had not only secured the inheritance, he had secured the remainder of her life. He had locked me out completely. My hands were perfectly steady. I saved the annotated PDF. I saved it to my desktop. Then I saved it again, into the secure cloud drive, right into the trip, proof folder. I renamed the file. Will executed OST17 PDF. I hit print. My little home printer whirred to life. I listened to it pull each sheet, the quiet, mechanical sound of the feed and the heat of the fuser. I stood there and watched all 18 pages of my disinheritance stack up in the output tray. I wanted a hard copy. I wanted to hold the paper. I wanted to feel the weight of it. When it was done, I picked up the stack. It was still warm from the printer. I sat down at my desk. I went back to Harold Pike's email. I clicked Reply All. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I was not angry. I was not sad. I was, for the first time in my life, completely, icily clear. I typed, "Thank you for the clarity. I will not be babysitting. Please only contact me when you are prepared to tell the truth." I hit send. The email vanished into the digital ether, sent to my mother's lawyer, my brother, and my sister. Then I began to work. I shut down my work laptop. I turned off my personal phone and left it on the charger. I went to my router and unplugged it from the wall. I would not be reached. I would not be stressed. I sat in the silence, holding the 18 printed pages. I looked at my suitcase by the door, packed for a trip to Toledo that would never happen. I walked over to it, unzipped it, and took out the clothes I had packed for my mother's birthday. I threw them on the bed. I went back to my laptop, I plugged the router back in just long enough to get a signal. I opened a new browser window. I canceled my flight to Toledo. I didn't care about the refund. I canceled the rental car. I went into my work's HR portal and changed my PTO request from family to personal. I opened a new browser tab, an airline. I didn't want to go to Ohio. I didn't want to be in the Midwest. I wanted to go somewhere the air was thin and dry, somewhere that had no memory of me, a place I had never been. I searched for flights, leaving this Thursday. Destination, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I found a nonstop flight. I didn't check the price. I didn't check the return date. I entered my credit card information. I clicked purchase. The confirmation popped up. I closed the laptop. I unplugged the router again. I was not going to Toledo. I was not going to be the family's convenient, strong, independent, unpaid help. I was going to the desert, the trip I had earned, the trip I had paid for, and I was taking my profound gratitude with me. I stepped off the plane in Albuquerque and felt the change immediately. The drive north to Santa Fe was like ascending to a different plane of existence. When I got out of the rental car at a small adobe inn tucked away off a dusty road, the air was the first thing that struck me. It wasn't air, not as I knew it in Ohio. The humid, heavy, lake-effect air of the Midwest was gone. This was thin, sharp, and clean. It carried the scent of pinon wood smoke and dry earth. The sky wasn't a familiar, pale blue. It was a vast, high-altitude turquoise that seemed to pull the breath from my chest, forcing me to take another. I spent the first day in a daze, a ghost haunting a beautiful landscape. I walked Canyon Road, the silence of the galleries feeling respectful. I was surrounded by art I couldn't afford, sculptures of serene horses and abstract bursts of color. I found a small shop smelling of cured leather and beeswax. I bought a journal. It was heavy, bound in dark brown leather, with thick cream-colored pages. I bought a pen, one with a smooth, heavy flow of black ink. I sat on a hidden stone bench in a courtyard, a small fountain trickling nearby. I opened the journal, promising myself I would write down the things I couldn't say, the things I was documenting in screenshots. But I just sat there. The pages remained empty. That night, in the profound, high-desert quiet of my room, I made a calculated decision. I needed to see the full scope of the attack. I had kept my phone on airplane mode for the entire 36-hour journey. I connected it to the inn's Wi-Fi. My phone didn't buzz. It seized. It was a solid, frantic vibration against the old wooden desk, a sound of pure electronic panic. The lock screen became a white, scrolling wall of notifications. The buffer had emptied. 32 text messages from Evan, 18 text messages from Mara, 9 missed calls from my mother, 2 missed calls from Harold Pike's office. I sat down and, with the detached focus of a project manager reviewing a failed project's logs, I read every single one. It was a precise, chronological escalation of their panic, not for my safety, but for their convenience. The first phase was confusion and annoyance. Evan: Ange, pick up. This isn't funny. Mara: if you're going to pout, fine, but we need to know if you're watching the kids or not. The second phase was dawning realization and anger. Evan: you read the will, didn't you? This is what this is. Money. I can't believe you. Mara: you are going to stress Mom out and make her sick. This is so typical. Angela: making it all about you. The third phase was sheer, sputtering rage and threats. Mara: I swear to God, if you don't answer me in 1 hour, I am calling the police and reporting you missing. You want to embarrass this family? Fine. Evan: we are on our way to your apartment. You can't just hide. This is cowardly. And the final one, sent just 30 minutes ago. Evan: we're here, at your building. Your car is gone. Where are you? We drove all the way to Columbus. We are at your house right now. Angela, open the door. The audacity. They had driven 2 hours from Toledo, likely with all 5 children in their cars, to stand on my doorstep and demand my physical presence. They thought I was hiding inside my own apartment, cowering. It had never, in their wildest imaginations, occurred to them that I had simply left, that I had a life and the resources to use them. I switched the phone to Do Not Disturb, silencing the incoming storm. I went to bed and slept for 10 straight hours, deeper than I had slept in years. The next morning, I left the phone in the room. I drove west, out of the city, toward the mountains. I drove to Bandelier National Monument. I needed to see something ancient, something that had survived. I walked down into the canyon, the sun warm on my head, the air cool in the shadows. I walked the path past the cliff dwellings, holes carved by hand into the soft volcanic tuff. I saw the ladders reaching up to small, dark caves. A community had been built, by hand, into the rock itself. It made my family's flimsy, cruel structure seem pathetic. I kept walking, taking a longer trail that climbed up the side of the canyon. I was alone. The only sound was the crunch of my boots on the dry trail and the wind in the high pines. I focused on my breathing, a steady rhythm. Inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It was a technique I used to manage high-stress client presentations. I was breathing out the rage, the betrayal, the acidic burn of profound gratitude. I was measuring my peace not in miles, but in breaths. When I returned to the inn that evening, I felt scoured clean. I turned on the phone, prepared for the next wave. The texts from Evan and Mara had continued, but they were now frantic, confused. They had realized I was truly gone. But there was one new message, from a different number, a number not in the main thread of abuse. It was from Lena, Evan's wife. It was a single line, sent at 3:15 in the morning, Ohio time. I get why you left. I'm sorry. I stared at it. It was a crack in the wall. Lena. She was not one of them. She was a witness. She was trapped in the immediate family with the man who had just stolen her children's aunt's inheritance. I didn't reply. I couldn't. Not yet. But I took a screenshot. I saved it to my trip. Proof folder. It was another piece of data. The next morning, I felt a shift. I wasn't just healing. I was preparing. I took my new leather-bound journal to a coffee shop in a hidden courtyard. This time, when I sat down, I began to write. I wrote the timeline, the text from Mara, the call from Evan, the call from Mom, the email from Harold Pike, the exact wording of the will, the springing power of attorney. A woman at the table next to me, sketching in her own notebook, smiled. She had a long braid of silver hair and paint stains on her cuffs. "You look like you're writing a legal brief, not a vacation diary," she said. I looked up, and for the first time, I didn't try to hide it. "Something like that. I'm a project manager, just outlining the scope." "Ah," she said, her eyes bright. "A fellow planner." She introduced herself as Arya, a painter. We talked for an hour. I didn't tell her the whole story, but I gave her the shape of it, the strong, independent daughter, the family that relies on her, the sudden, stress-induced financial clause in a legal document. Arya stopped sketching. She put down her pencil and looked at me, her expression friendly but sharp as glass. "Honey," she said, "they don't call women strong unless they want to borrow that strength, for free." Her words landed, for free. My profound gratitude. "This stress clause you mentioned," she said, "the one that gives your brother control if your mother gets upset?" "A springing power of attorney," I said, the term feeling clean and cold. "That's not a legal document," Arya said, lowering her voice. "That's a trap. It's a loaded gun, and they're just waiting for you to provide the stress so they can pull the trigger. Air is good," she said, gesturing to the bright Santa Fe sky. "But air doesn't fix a bad contract. See a lawyer, not your family's lawyer, your lawyer." I went back to my room at the Adobe Inn. Arya's words echoed in my head. That's a trap. I sat at the small, worn wooden desk. I opened my laptop. I connected to the Wi-Fi. I found the email from Harold Pike. I did not hit reply all. I hit reply, to him and him alone. The email I composed was short, professional, and cold. Mr. Pike, thank you for providing the executed documents. I am currently out of state on pre-scheduled personal leave. I require a private 1-hour consultation regarding this new will and the previous estate plan. I will be back in Ohio on Monday, the 17th. Please send me your availability for that week. I paused, then added one more line. I will be retaining my own counsel to join me, but I wish to speak with you first. I hit send. I wasn't done the rest of the night. I didn't look at travel blogs. I didn't look at restaurants. I opened a new browser window and began to research. I searched for Ohio probate law. I read about will contests, about filing motions. And then I found it, the legal term for what had happened. Undue influence. I read the definition, the legal tests, a confidential relationship with the testator, a susceptible testator, a suspicious transaction that unnaturally favors one beneficiary, Evan, the miracle son, my mother, easily stressed, easily led, a will signed on the exact day they booked the trip, a will that disinherited 2 children and gave everything to one. I opened my new leather journal. Under the timeline, I wrote the words in clear black ink, undue influence. I looked at the notes I had taken, all my life. I had been fighting for a seat at their table. I had been knocking on the door, begging to be let in, begging to be seen, to be immediate. I had been so desperate for their validation, for a scrap of inheritance, for inclusion on a simple birthday trip. I closed the journal, I realized, sitting in that quiet room, 7,000 feet above sea level. I had been asking the wrong question. I didn't want their table. The table was rotten. It was built on my silence. I was done asking for a seat. I was going to build my own. I returned to Ohio on a Sunday night. The flight from Albuquerque landed in Columbus, and the air that hit me when I walked out of the terminal was a familiar, wet slap. After the high, dry clarity of Santa Fe, the Ohio humidity felt personal and oppressive, a damp wool blanket I had been forced to wear my whole life. The sky was low and gray. This was not a place for epiphanies. It was a place for work. On Monday morning, I did not drive to my office at Northbridge and Lane. I drove 2 hours north, to Toledo. Harold Pike's office was in an old, respectable brick building on a street lined with aging trees. His name was on a small, polished brass plaque. The lobby smelled of floor wax. His office itself was exactly what I had imagined. Dark, heavy, oak-paneled walls, shelves of leather-bound books that looked like they were part of the architecture, and a silence so thick it felt like padding. Harold Pike was older than his email signature suggested, a man in his late 60s with thin gray hair and the exhausted, careful eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime documenting other people's bad decisions. He looked less like a co-conspirator and more like a man who was deeply, professionally uncomfortable. Ms. Ortiz, Angela, thank you for coming in. He gestured to a stiff-backed leather chair. He did not smile. I didn't sit. I placed my briefcase on the floor next to the chair. Mr. Pike, I said, keeping my voice level, the project manager voice I used for high-stakes negotiations. My email was clear. I am retaining my own counsel, but before I start paying them by the hour to find out what you know, I wanted to see if you would simply tell me the truth. He sighed, a long, slow exhale that seemed to deflate him. He steepled his fingers on the vast, empty surface of his desk. Ms. Ortiz, the document I sent you is the executed last will and testament of my client, Mildred Ortiz. My mother, I said. She is my mother. Of course, it represents her wishes as she stated them to me. Or as my brother stated them to her, I countered. Harold Pike looked at the door, then back at me. He opened the thick, pale blue folder on his desk. The tab read, Ortiz, Mildred. It is a complicated situation. It doesn't seem complicated, Harold. It seems brutally simple. My brother gets the house, the retirement, and the insurance. My sister gets $15,000. I get her used books and a line item about gratitude. What part of that is complicated? He looked down, and when he looked up, he had made a decision. He reached into the back of the file. "This," he said, "is the complication." He pulled out a thinner, simpler document, stapled in the corner. He slid it across the acres of polished mahogany. "This is your mother's previous will, executed 16 months ago." My breath locked in my chest. I picked it up. I didn't need to read the whole thing. I read Article 3. It was short. "I devise and bequeath all my assets, real and personal, to be divided in 3 equal shares, to my children, Mara Collins, Evan Ortiz, and Angela Ortiz. Equal. 16 months ago, I was equal. The new will revokes this one," I stated. "It attempts to," Harold said, his voice quiet but precise. "But the revocation clause in the new instrument is poorly drafted. It's a general revocation. It doesn't properly reference the specific date or execution of the prior will. It's a procedural weakness, a significant one. It's an ambiguity a court could look at very closely." He was handing me a key. He was telling me the new lock was faulty. "Tell me about the signing," I said, finally sitting down. "October 17th. Tell me everything." He leaned back, the old leather chair groaning. He opened his file and began to read from his own handwritten notes, a courtesy he was not legally required to extend. "Evan made the appointment. He paid the retainer for the revision with his credit card, not your mother's." "Motive? I thought he paid for the transaction." "They arrived together," he continued. "Your mother seemed quiet, not confused, but passive. Evan, however, was not. He was very talkative." "Was he in the room for the entire meeting?" Harold Pike nodded, his face grim. "I asked him to step out. Standard practice. I need to be alone with my client to confirm her intentions. Evan refused." "He refused?" "He stated," Harold said, his eyes on his notes, "that Mom gets anxious with these legal things and that he was there to help her process the language. He said he was her advocate." "Her advocate," I repeated. The word was poison. "When I would ask your mother a direct question, for example, 'Mildred, do you understand that this clause gives the Dayton property entirely to Evan?' she would look at him, and Evan would answer for her. What did he say? He would say, 'Yes, we discussed this, Mom. Remember? This is what we wanted. It's for the family.' He used that phrase, 'for the family,' at least 5 times. When I pushed, when I said, 'Mildred, I need to hear it from you,' she would just nod and say, 'Yes, whatever Evan thinks. It's for the family.' The room felt cold. He was describing a hostage situation, just without a weapon. "I tried again," Harold said, and I could hear the defensiveness in his voice, the sound of a man reliving a failure. "I told Evan, I must insist on a private consultation with my client to ensure she is not under duress." He stood up. He told me I was agitating his mother. He said she was under a lot of stress, and I was making it worse, and if I didn't proceed, he would find a lawyer who understood their family's needs. He accused me of trying to confuse a senior. He turned the yellow legal pad in the file so I could see it, his own handwriting. In the margin of the notes from that day, underlined twice in hard, red ink, were 2 words, "red flags." Beside my name, he had drawn a large, circled question mark. He had known. He had known it was wrong, and he had let it happen. He had let my brother bully him into signing away my inheritance. I looked at this weak man, this compromised professional, and I made a decision. I was not going to attack him. I was going to use him. "Harold," I said. My voice was no longer angry. It was the voice I used at work when a project was on fire. It was the voice of the solution. "We have a problem. You and I, your file has been compromised, your client has been compromised, and I am about to fix it." He looked startled. "What do you mean?" "I am forming a team," I said. I pulled the leather-bound journal from my briefcase. "Right now, the team is me. As of this second, the team is me and you." "Me? Angela, I can't." "You must," You have a file full of red flags and a competing valid will. You are ethically bound to see this ambiguity resolved, or I can make your life very difficult. Which do you prefer?" He nodded, a look of profound relief on his face. He didn't want to fight. He wanted to be told what to do. "Okay," I said, opening my journal to a fresh page. "We gather data. I need a copy of that old will. I need a certified copy of your handwritten red flag notes. I need the billing record showing Evan paid for the revision." He started making a list. "Next, we need an investigator, a civil investigator, someone who can pull financial records. I am certain my mother has been loaning Evan money. We need to establish a pattern of financial dependency. This is the motive for his influence." "I know someone," Harold said, his voice stronger. "Tala Ruiz. She's ex-military intelligence. She's based in Cleveland. She finds things people have buried in concrete." "Perfect. Hire her. Today, I want her to pull every bank transfer, every Venmo, every check written from Mom to Evan for the last 36 months. I want his credit report. I want to know how much debt he's in." "That's aggressive," Harold said. "This is an investigation," I replied. "Next, the therapist. My mother used to see a Dr. Evelyn Aris about 6 months ago. She suddenly switched. I need Tala to find out who the new therapist is. I need to know who made the appointment, and I will bet you my profound gratitude that Evan attends every single session." "To manage her anxiety," Harold said, the pieces clicking together. "To control the narrative," I corrected. "To isolate her. It's a classic maneuver." I stood up and walked to the wall, to the single, abstract painting hanging there. I was drawing a map in my head. "So, we have the team, me, the project manager, you, the legal mechanism, Tala, the data miner. This is what we are going to do." I turned back to him. "We build a timeline. We start 16 months ago, with the equal will. Mom is lucid, fair, and acting alone. We move to the last year, where Tala's data will show Evan's increasing advances and his financial desperation. We mark the 6-month point. The therapist is changed. The isolation begins. We land on October 17th. Evan pays for the new will. Evan sits in the room. Evan answers for her. Evan refuses to let you. Her legal counsel. Speak to her alone. The new will is signed. That same day, he and Mara book a family trip and exclude me. The person who gets nothing. It's a perfect, closed loop of coercion." "When you lay it out like that," Harold murmured, looking at his own file with disgust. "This is our strategy," I said, ignoring him. "We are going on the offensive. This week, you are going to file a petition in probate court. It will have 2 prongs. Prong 1. We move to have the original 16-month-old will validated and admitted, on the grounds that the new will's revocation clause is procedurally defective and invalid. And if the judge doesn't buy that?" "Prong 2, I said. "We move to have the new will thrown out entirely on the grounds of undue influence. We will use your notes. We will use Tala's financial reports. We will use the record of his paying for the will. We will use the therapist records. And we will use my folder of screenshots from the trip I was uninvited from. We will show a clear, deliberate, and malicious pattern of isolation and coercion for financial gain." I closed my journal. I snapped my briefcase shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. "Angela," Harold said, standing as I moved to the door. This will destroy your family." I paused, my hand on the cool brass doorknob. I looked back at the oak-paneled walls, at this man in his fortress of paper. "You're wrong, Mr. Pike," I said. "My family was already destroyed. They just forgot to send me the memo. I'm just here to read the minutes." I walked out of his office, back into the heavy, familiar gray of Ohio. But the air didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt electric. The investigation had begun. I gave Harold and Tala 2 days. Tala Ruiz, it turned out, was a force of nature. Within 48 hours, she had produced a preliminary financial profile on Evan that was breathtaking in its irresponsibility. He was leveraged to the hilt, A second mortgage on his house, 2 maxed-out credit cards, a car loan he was 90 days past due on, and, as I had suspected, a steady 3-year IV drip of loans from my mother, totaling over $50,000, which Tala had found through subpoenaed bank records. The therapist, just as I'd guessed, was new. Evan had found him. Evan scheduled all appointments, and Evan sat in the waiting room for the full 50-minute session. Every time. We had the motive. We had the means. We had the opportunity. We had the red flag notes from Harold. We had the defective revocation clause. We had the screenshots of the trip. The only thing missing was the final, human piece. I needed to hear it from my mother, and I needed to get it on the record. "A public place," Tala said, her voice crisp and low on the phone. "Ohio is a one-party consent state for recording. As long as you are a party to the conversation, you can record it. But if we do it in public, it's even cleaner. There's no expectation of privacy. I'll be your one party." I chose the Maple and Mint, a bright, airy cafe in Toledo, halfway between my mother's house and Harold's office. It was known for its pies. It was always full of chattering old ladies and young families. It was the perfect, neutral ground. I set the meeting for 11 a.m. on a Wednesday. I arrived at 10:45. Tala was already there, as I knew she would be. She was sitting at a small two-top in the corner, a laptop open, a half-eaten scone on a plate. She looked like a freelance graphic designer, not a military intelligence-trained investigator. She was wearing earbuds, but I knew they were connected to a high-sensitivity microphone in her purse. She met my eyes for 1/2 second, a clinical, imperceptible nod, and then looked back at her screen. She was invisible. My mother walked in at 11:03. She looked smaller than I remembered, diminished. Her hair, usually perfectly coiffed, was a little flat. She was clutching her purse to her chest like a shield. "Angela," she said, her voice tight, This is a strange place. Why are we here?" "Hello." "Mom," I said. I had already ordered 2 coffees, 1 black, 1 with cream and 2 sugars, just how she liked it, and a slice of apple pie. I pushed the pie and the creamed coffee toward her. "I wanted to talk to you, and I wanted it to be somewhere nice." She sat, but she didn't relax. She didn't touch the coffee. "Your brother is very, very upset with you. Mara, too. You have turned this family upside down. Angela, after everything we've done for you." The old script, I refused to read my lines. I leaned forward, keeping my voice soft, but my words were not. "Mom, I have the new will. Harold sent it to me." Her eyes flickered to the left, a sign of panic I had seen since I was a child. "Oh, it's just paperwork, lawyers." "No, Mom, it's not. It's a document that gives Evan the house, the retirement, and the insurance. It gives Mara $15,000, and it gives me your books and your gratitude. That's what I want to talk about." I, she stammered. "I don't remember the details. Harold Pike. He's the expert." "Evan was there, wasn't he? When you signed it?" She flinched. He helps me. He knows I get stressed by all that legal stuff." This was it. I could see Tala shift in her seat out of the corner of my eye, her focus absolute. I kept my voice just as calm, just as low. "Mom," I said, "I have to ask this, and I need you to think about it before you answer. Was it your choice, or were you chosen?" She looked at me, her eyes wide with a confusion that looked genuine. "What? What does that mean? Did you wake up that morning and decide, I am going to disinherit one of my daughters and give everything to my son? Or did you just sign what he told you to sign? Did you even read it?" "Don't talk about money." Her voice rose, sharp and cracking, and 2 women at a nearby table looked over. "It's ugly. You're being ugly. Talking about money makes me tired. Angela, so tired." It was the classic deflection, the stress she had been trained to perform, the stress that Evan had literally written into a legal document to use as a weapon. I tried a different tack, the one I had rehearsed, I softened my voice even more, leaning in as if I were comforting her. I understand. Mom, it's a lot. They just put it all in front of you, didn't they? They told you it was for the best, that it was for the family. They probably just said, "Sign here, Mom. Just sign it so we can be done. So Angela doesn't have to worry. So she doesn't make a fuss." Is that what he said? I was just guessing, but I wasn't. I was just summarizing my entire life. My mother's eyes, to my shock, filled with tears. She looked down at her untouched pie, and she gave a tiny, almost imperceptible, spasmodic nod. Yes. My heart didn't leap. It just hurt. But it was the data point I needed, across the room. I saw Tala make a quick, sharp note on her laptop. She had seen it. The microphone. I prayed, had caught my question and the small, choked sob that accompanied her admission. We were in a public space. It was all legal. It was all on the record. Mom, I was cut off. The front bell of the cafe jangled violently, swinging open so hard it hit the wall. It was Evan. He wasn't just Evan. He was Evan in full, righteous fury, and he was not alone. He was dragging his 2 children, Liam and Sophie, by the hands. They looked terrified. He had brought the moral pressure. He had brought his human shields. "I knew it!" he shouted, pointing at me. The entire cafe went silent. "I knew you would try to get to her. I knew you'd try to pull something." My mother shrank, cowering, and whispered, "Evan, no, please." Tala was already typing, her face a mask of professional neutrality, documenting the entire public disturbance. "You can't do this, Angela." Evan stalked toward our table, pulling his children with him. "You can't just harass her in public. She's stressed. Look at her. You're making her sick." He pulled up a chair, scraping it loudly on the tile floor, and slammed it down. Then, in a move of such breathtaking, clumsy imitation, he pulled out his own smartphone and hit record. He placed it on the table between us, the screen facing up. "Now," he said, breathing heavily. "We're going to talk, and it's all going to be on the record. You're going to tell me why you're harassing our mother." The children were standing beside him, little horrified witnesses. Sophie, the younger one, started to cry. This was the moment, the significant emotional or mental stress. He was creating it. He was daring me to be the undue influence. He thought I would scream, that I would yell, that I would fight him. He thought I was him. I did not raise my voice. I did not look at his phone. I looked at him, my project manager's gaze, the one that assesses a failed timeline. "Hello, Evan," I said, my voice as calm and cool as the Santa Fe air. "There's no need for that. I was CC'd on the will." The statement threw him. He was prepared for a fight about emotion, not paperwork. "What?" "I was CC'd on the will. The one you had her sign on October 17th. The one where you get the house, the retirement, and the insurance. And I get the books. I know everything. Evan, we've all seen it." He was turning red, his knuckles white on the back of the chair. He had walked into a trap. That's what Mom wanted," he sputtered. I was helping her. You made her sign that old will, the first one." "I didn't even know there was a first one." "Evan, but you did, didn't you?" I had to fix it. I had to protect her. I had to protect our family. Mom signed the new will exactly like I planned." He had said it. The words hung in the dead silent cafe, as loud as the bell he had slammed against the wall. His own phone was recording it. Tala's microphone was recording it. My ears were recording it. My mother, who had been a small, trembling bird, suddenly looked up. The fear in her eyes was replaced, for 1 second, with a sharp, cold clarity. She turned, not to me, but to him. "Planned?" she whispered. Her voice, though quiet, cut through Evan's bluster. He realized what he had said. His face went from red to a sick, pale white. "Mom, No. I meant we planned to get your affairs in order. A plan? She said again, louder. Evan, what plan? The key word had landed, the single damning term, caught on two separate, legally admissible recordings. I stood up. Evan and my mother both looked at me, shocked. I was ending the meeting. I was the one walking away. I took my wallet out of my purse. I put a $20 bill on the table. It was more than enough for the pie and the coffees. The rest of this, I said, my voice clear and carrying through the room, is for the court. Today, we're just having pie. I picked up my purse. I looked down at my mother, who looked terrified. Not of me, but of the son who had just been unmasked. Come on, Mom, I said, my voice softening, but still firm. I'll take you home. I put my hand on her elbow. The woman who had called me selfish, who had let her son disinherit me, looked at my hand, then looked at Evan's furious, cornered face, and she made a choice. She stood up. She let me, the strong, selfish, independent daughter, take her by the arm. I walked her out of the Maple and Mint, past Tala, who was still typing. I walked her past my brother, who was frozen in his chair, his own phone still recording his catastrophic failure. I walked her past his two crying children. As I helped her into my passenger seat, I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman who had failed me. I saw a small, weak, frightened person, a person who had spent her entire life simply giving in to the loudest voice in the room. And I realized, with a sickening thud, that Evan had always been the loudest, and I had always been the most silent. The dynamic was being reversed, right here in this parking lot, and she was terrified. Harold Pike, energized by a clear directive and, I suspect, a desire to redeem his professional integrity, moved with a speed that startled me. He filed the petition in probate court the very next morning. It was not a plea. It was a 20-page, surgically worded document, citing case law and attaching exhibits. It was a declaration of war. It formally requested two things. First, that the court immediately invalidate the new will, the one executed on October 17th, citing both procedural defects in the revocation clause and clear, demonstrable undue influence. Second, that the court reinstate and admit to probate the prior, validly executed will from 16 months ago, the one that treated all three children as equals. The legal system, so often a slow and grinding machine, reacted with surprising speed. The probate judge, a woman known for her low tolerance for family theatrics, read the petition, saw Harold's attached notes, and acted. She issued an ex parte order before Evan's new, high-priced lawyer even had time to file a response. It was an immediate, temporary injunction. All of my mother's assets were frozen. The order was served on Evan, on my mother, and on the financial institutions themselves. The Vanguard IRA was locked. The Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance policy was frozen. No beneficiaries could be changed or borrowed against. The title on the Dayton house was encumbered, preventing any sale or equity loan. My brother, who had been living on a steady diet of my mother's advances, was abruptly, violently cut off. The family trip, I noted, had been quietly canceled. Evan, I was certain, was no longer in a celebratory mood. The response from my family was immediate, and it bifurcated along predictable lines. Evan went silent, barricading himself behind his new attorney. He was now a legal problem. Mara, however, became an emotional one. She had no understanding of legal procedure, only of shame, which she wielded as her primary weapon. An email landed in my inbox 3 days after the filing. The subject line was, simply, "What you have done." It was a novel of accusations. Angela, I hope you are proud of yourself. Mom is an absolute wreck. She is crying all the time. She said she doesn't even know who you are anymore. She told me she is so stressed, she can't sleep. You took her kindness and her anxiety, and you twisted it into this ugly, public thing. You brought in lawyers. You are tearing this family apart over a few stupid pieces of furniture and some money you didn't even earn. Evan has a family. Angela, 5 people. 5 people who depend on him, who he is trying to protect. You have no one. You have your job and your empty apartment. You have no idea what real responsibility is. You are the most selfish person I've ever known. You are destroying our mother for spite. You will never be forgiven for this. I read it twice. The key words, stressed and family, were weapons she had clearly learned from Evan. I didn't feel anger. I felt calm. It was the most valuable piece of evidence I had received all week. It was a written confession of their entire psychological framework. This was the gaslighting. This was the isolation. This was the good reason doctrine. Codified. I did not reply. I took a screenshot, saved it to the trip, proof folder, and forwarded the entire email chain to Harold and Tala with a single subject line. Evidence gaslighting 01. Harold's reply came back in 5 minutes. Printing this, highlighting the relevant parts. This is a gift, Angela. It shows their state of mind and their motive to isolate you. It's beautiful. The real breakthrough, however, came not from a spreadsheet or a legal filing, but from a single terrified phone call. It came on a Tuesday night. I was at home, reviewing a project timeline for Northbridge and Lane. An unknown number flashed on my screen. I answered, my voice all business. This is Angela. Is this Angela Ortiz? The voice was a whisper, thin and shaking. Who is speaking? It's Lena, Evan's wife. I sat bolt upright in my chair. Lena, are you all right? No, she said, and her voice broke into a small, dry sob. I am not. He is going crazy. Since the accounts were frozen, he's screaming all the time. He's yelling about the house, the money. He says you're trying to put him in jail. He threw a lamp. My blood ran cold. Lena, are you safe? Are the children safe? I'm at a hotel, she whispered. I'm leaving him. I have to. But that's not why I'm calling. I am calling because I can't. I can't be a part of this. I can't lie for him. Lie about what, Lena? The rehearsal, she said, the word coming out in a rush. The night before they went to that lawyer's office. The night before they signed that thing, he was in the den. Your mom was with him. He thought I was asleep. He was rehearsing with her. Angela. He had yellow legal pads. He had notes. He was feeding her lines. I was frozen, my pen hovering over my work notepad. He kept saying, No, Mom, don't say that. Just say you're stressed. Just say it's for the family. Just say I handle the money because it confuses you. He made her practice it, over and over, for hours. He called it getting their story straight. He was coaching her, like a play. Lena, I said, my voice barely audible. Will you sign an affidavit? Will you testify to that? There was a long, terrible silence, filled with her shaky breathing. Yes, she finally said, her voice suddenly firm. I will. I'm filing for divorce in the morning. He's not the man I married. He's just this thing his family made, and I am done. The next day, Tala Ruiz delivered the digital smoking gun. She had been digging into Evan's financial life, and in doing so, had discovered a secondary email account he used for, of all things, video game forums. He had been sloppy. He's not smart, Angela, her report said. Just loud. He used this private email to communicate with his mortgage broker because he didn't want Lena to see the new loan applications. Attached was a single, forwarded message. The date was October 18th, the day after the will was signed. The recipient was his mortgage broker. The subject was, Green light, Dayton property. The body of the email read, It's done. The new will is executed and locked in. She's solid. We are good to go. I want to close on the home equity loan before Thanksgiving. Let's get this done fast, so there's no time for anyone to get jumpy or ask questions. Need to pull out the first $150,000 immediately. Let me know what you need. He was cashing the check. He was leveraging the house, his inheritance, before my mother had even had a chance to get sick. He was using the document he had coerced her into signing as collateral for his own failing finances. Harold added it to the petition as Exhibit D, premeditation and malice. The other side was in disarray. Harold received a formal notice that my mother had retained new counsel, a high-priced, aggressive firm from downtown Columbus, paid for, no doubt, by the last fumes of Evan's credit. They immediately filed a motion to dismiss our petition, claiming testator's clear and present intent, and accusing me, in language that was almost identical to Mara's email, of frivolous litigation and elder harassment. It didn't matter. Harold still had his notes. The notes he, as her attorney of record, had taken, the notes detailing the red flags, the notes documenting Evan's specific, verbal refusal to leave the room. Harold, to his own profound discomfort, was now a primary witness against his former client's new will. We had the audio. The transcript from the Maple and Mint was clean. My mother's clear. Shocked. Plan? In response to Evan's catastrophic admission, it was the sound of a woman who had no idea what she had signed. It proved she didn't understand the scope of the documents. Tala had even managed to get a sworn, notarized statement from the new therapist. It was carefully worded, respecting privacy, but it was devastating. While Mrs. Ortiz displays no signs of cognitive incapacity, it read, she demonstrates an extreme susceptibility to suggestion from figures she perceives as strong or authoritative, particularly male family members. She presents with significant anxiety regarding conflict and will almost always default to the path of least resistance to keep the peace. The judge read our response. He read the therapist's statement. He read Lena's affidavit. He read Evan's email to his mortgage broker. He denied their motion to dismiss. He denied it with prejudice. And he set a hearing date. The subpoenas went out. Evan Ortiz, Mara Collins, Harold Pike, Dr. Alistair Finch, and Lena Ortiz. The entire cast was being called to the stage. Through all of this, I went to work. I drove my modest sedan to Northbridge and Lane. I sat at my desk, under the fluorescent lights. I managed the Avera platform launch. I led 3-hour virtual meetings. I wrote up scope documents. I updated timelines. The mundane, structured, logical world of project management was my anchor. My team was hitting all its fourth-quarter goals. My boss, Dana Cross, a sharp woman who missed nothing and spoke only in deliverables, called me into her glass-walled office. Angela, she said, motioning for me to sit. I don't know what's going on in your personal life, and I don't want to, but I do know you've been putting in extra hours and your output has been flawless. Whatever it is, you're handling it. I'm just managing the project, Dana, I said. She smiled, a thin, rare smile. That's why you're good at this. Most people get lost in the drama. They get emotional. They panic. They make mistakes. You just see the next deliverable. You keep your eye on the objective, and you don't get sucked into the noise. It's a rare skill. I nodded, accepting the compliment. She was right. This was just the biggest, ugliest project of my life, and I was managing it to the letter. The hearing was just the final stakeholder presentation. The hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The week before was a strange, dead calm, like the air before a tornado. The legal maneuvers were complete. The data was filed. All that was left was the testimony. On Thursday evening, 3 days before the hearing, my phone lit up with a text message. It was from a number I didn't recognize, but the preview on the lock screen made my stomach clench. Angela, this is Mom. I am using a neighbor's phone. Evan is listening to my calls. Please stop this. It is killing me. I stared at the message. She had found a way out, a moment of privacy, and this was what she chose to say. Not, I was wrong. Not, he forced me, but stop this. It is killing me. The guilt. It was her oldest, most reliable tool. I typed a reply, my thumb hovering over the send button. This is not a neighbor's phone. This is your phone. He is not listening. You are just scared. What do you want, Mom? The response came almost immediately. I want you to drop this. This court. It's embarrassing. It's ugly. If you just drop this, I promise, I will fix it. I'll change it back later. After things calm down. I promise. Later. I promise. The two most worthless phrases in the Ortiz family vocabulary. A later that would never come. A promise made in secret. One that Evan would bully her out of the moment my back was turned. She was offering me a shadow deal. A return to the old system of whispers and back channels. Also, she could avoid one single, public moment of truth. I typed my final response. My fingers were steady. I don't need a promise in the dark. Mom, I need justice in the light. This is not about the money. This is about the lie. I will see you in court on Monday. I sent it. I did not get a reply. 2 nights later, on Saturday, the final act of desperation arrived at my door. It was 7 p.m. I was in my apartment in Columbus, double-checking the bag I had packed for the drive to Toledo the next day. It contained my suit, my copy of the file, and my leather-bound journal. The doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. My pulse jumped. I looked through the peephole. It was Mara. She was not alone. She had, as Evan had before her, brought the children, all 3 of them. They were huddled behind her, looking cold and confused. Mara herself was holding a bakery box. The string looped around her wrist. It was a perfect, curated image of sisterly concern. It was a calculated, emotional ambush. I opened the door. Angela, she said, her voice attempting a warmth that didn't reach her eyes. Hi, we were in Columbus for a kids thing at the zoo. I wanted to see you. I brought that lemon cake you like. She was using her children as a battering ram of normalcy. See? We are just a normal family. I am your sister. I brought cake. I looked at her, then at the 3 little shivering bodies behind her. My nephew, Liam, the oldest, looked exhausted. It's cold. Mara, I said. Are you going to stand in the hallway? Relief washed over her face. She thought she was in. Oh, thank you. Ange, kids, say hi to your Aunt Angela. Hi, Aunt Angela, they mumbled, staring at the floor. I stepped back and held the door open. Mara, you can come in. The kids, however, are going to watch a movie in the other room. Mara frowned, confused. What? I am not having this conversation in front of them, I said, my voice quiet but absolute. It's not their fault, and they are not pawns. Liam, Sophie, Emma, come with me. I have a new set of building blocks and a very big television. I led the 3 of them into my small den, leaving Mara standing alone and awkward in my living room, still holding the cake. I turned on the TV, put on an animated movie, and opened a brand new 100-piece set of wooden architectural blocks I had bought for this exact possibility. I was, after all, a project manager. I believed in contingency planning. Build me a castle, I said to them. The person who builds the highest tower gets, well, you just get to win. Liam gave me a small, genuine smile. They were good kids. They were just trapped, as I had been, in a bad system. I closed the den door, leaving a small crack. Then I walked back into the living room. Mara had placed the cake on my coffee table, an offering on an altar. She was wringing her hands, her performance of the concerned sister already crumbling, revealing the raw panic beneath. You bought them toys? She asked, her voice tight. I bought them a distraction, I said. I did not sit. I stood across the room from her, forcing her to look up at me. Why are you here, Mara? The zoo is 2 hours from Toledo. You've been driving for 4. That's a long trip for a piece of cake. I wanted to talk to you before Monday. Before the hearing, I stated. The one you've been subpoenaed for. Yes, she whispered. What do you want to say, Mara? I want you to stop, she burst out. her voice cracking. I want you to just stop. Look at what you're doing. Mom is a wreck. Evan is a mess. You've frozen everything. You have ruined this family. I just watched her. I let the accusation hang in the air, let its own weight pull it to the floor. I ruined it, I said, my voice flat. Or did I just turn on the lights? Did you know, Mara, when you sent me that text, the immediate family-only text, did you know he was getting everything? She looked down at her feet. Her hands were twisting the strap of her purse. It wasn't like that. What was it like? I pressed. Tell me. You're not on the stand yet. It was, Evan said. He said Mom was worried about her future, about having someone to manage things. He said he had a family. He has 3 kids. I have 3. He has responsibilities, real ones. And you're fine. There it was, the good reason doctrine, in all its ugly glory, the justification. I'm fine, I repeated. And he has responsibilities. Yes, she said, seizing it. Yes, he needed it more. He's got all those mouths to feed. You've got your job. You're independent. It seemed fair, in a way, that the one with the most need got the help. The help, I said. You mean the house, the IRA, the life insurance, the entire estate? And you? What about your fairness? You got $15,000 for your silence. You sold your inheritance, and mine, for $15,000. That's not true, she cried, stung. It wasn't like that. What if Mom had died? Mara, I asked, my voice cutting through her excuses. What? The trip, the one I was uninvited from, the one you were all going on 2 weeks after the will was signed. What if she had a heart attack on that trip? What if she died right there, in that hotel? Evan would have gotten everything. He would have cashed that check. He would have had her equity loan approved before the funeral. And you? You would have had your $15,000, and I would have had her used books. Would that have felt fair? Mara went silent. She had never, not for 1 second, considered that. She had never thought past the immediate problem, the immediate pressure from Evan. She stared at me, her mouth slightly open. She was, I realized, not evil. She was just weak, a profound, hollow, structural weakness. I walked over to my desk. I picked up a thin black binder, the binder my assistant, Dana, had told me I should make. You know, I said, my voice conversational, I've been fine for a long time. I've been independent my whole life. Do you know what that actually means in this family? I opened the binder. It was the spreadsheet, the one I had been keeping for 2 years. The cost of being fine. I had printed it. This, I said, is my independence, Mara. I didn't give it to her. I just turned it around and held it up. I had color-coded it. Blue for time cost, red for financial cost, green for the good reason. Her eyes widened. She saw the columns. She saw the dates. What? What is that? This is the last 2 years. This is the 3 a.m. drive to the emergency room for Liam's fever because your husband was too drunk to drive. Time cost, 5 hours. Good reason. Mara is exhausted. This is the $700 property tax bill for Mom that I paid because Evan had a tight month. Financial cost, $700. This, I said, my finger jabbing at a line, is the $4,600 in catering, airfare, and shared gifts I have covered for this family since last January. This is the 48-hour weekend I spent watching your children, for free, so you could go to a wine tasting, which you told Mom you were too busy to skip. This is the logbook of every Angela will do it, and Angela is strong, and Angela is fine. I let her look at it, the neat, black and white lines, the sum at the bottom. The total was staggering, even to me. You thought it was fair, I said, my voice dropping. You thought I didn't need anything, the truth, Mara, is that I have been funding your and Evan's lives for years. I am not fine. I am just the one who pays the bill. Mara sank onto my sofa, her hands covering her face. She wasn't crying. Not yet. She was just broken. The narrative she had told herself, the good reason, had just been eviscerated by data. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice muffled by her hands. I never added it up. I didn't want to fight. Fight who? Him, she said, looking up, her eyes desperate and raw. Evan. And Mom. You know what he's like. He yells. He pushes. He gets what he wants. He always gets what he wants. And Mom she lets him. She always has. And I was scared. It was easier to just agree. It was just easier. I was scared of him. There it was, the real truth. Not fairness, not responsibility, just pure, simple, lifelong cowardice. I'm scared too. Mara, I said, and the admission surprised me. I'm terrified. I'm terrified of Monday. I'm terrified of what this has done. But you know what? Being scared is not an excuse. It's not a good reason. It's just a feeling. It's not a justification for signing away someone else's life. It's not a reason to be a party to a crime. I closed the binder. The conversation was over. There was nothing left to say. We stood in the silence of my living room, the sound of the animated movie, a distant, cheerful battle, drifting from the den. Mara looked at the cake on the coffee table. She looked at the binder in my hand. Then she looked at the small kitchen off my living room. I had a few dishes in the sink from my dinner, a plate, a glass, a fork. She stood up, her movements stiff, robotic. She didn't say anything. She walked past me, into my kitchen. She turned on the hot water. I heard the sound of the dish soap bottle being opened. She just stood there, at my sink, and she began to wash my dishes. She didn't scrub them, not really. She just held the plate under the running water, her back to me, her shoulders shaking in a silent, contained, awful way. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't an alliance. It was the first responsible act I had seen her perform in a decade. It was the simple, wordless, domestic labor of a woman who had no words left to say. I let her wash the plate. The courtroom in Toledo was not a grand hall of justice. It was a small, heavy room, paneled in dark wood that had been polished so many times it seemed to absorb the light. It smelled of old varnish, dusty legal books, and the faint, anxious odor of stale coffee. Judge Kerrigan, a woman in her late 60s with silver hair pulled back in a severe bun, presided with an air of profound, exhausted patience. She had seen, I was sure, every possible version of human failing. I sat in the front row, directly behind Harold Pike. I was wearing my best navy blue suit. My spine was straight. My hands were clasped over my leather-bound journal. I was not a daughter. I was a project manager. And this was the final presentation. Harold stood. He was not the nervous, compromised man I had first met. He was in his element, a place of procedure and fact. Your Honor, he began, his voice clear and steady. We are here to correct a gross distortion of testamentary intent. We have two competing documents. The first, a validly executed will from 16 months ago, represents the clear, balanced, and fair intent of the testator, Mildred Ortiz, an equal division among her 3 children. The second, and he placed a hand on the new, thicker document, is a product not of intent, but of a campaign of calculated, malicious, and demonstrable undue influence. He laid out the 2-pronged attack we had planned. First, the procedural failure. The new will's revocation clause was improperly drafted, creating a legal ambiguity, but he didn't linger there. More importantly, Your Honor, we will show that this second will is the result of a confidential relationship being exploited. We will show a testator who was isolated, a beneficiary who controlled her finances and her medical care, and a signing that was, in effect, a coercion. Evan's new, high-priced lawyer, a man in a suit so sharp it looked like it could cut, rose for his opening. His entire strategy was to put the good reasons on trial. Your Honor, what my learned colleague calls undue influence, we call family. What he calls coercion, we call care. This is not a legal drama. This is a family matter. It is the story of a loving son, Mr. Evan Ortiz, a man with a family, a man with real-world responsibilities, stepping in to help his aging mother manage her complex affairs. And it is the story of a successful, independent sister, he said the word like it was an insult, who is now, out of spite, attempting to override her mother's clear wishes simply because she did not like the outcome. We will show that Mrs. Ortiz was lucid, and that she simply chose to provide for the part of her family that needed it most. This is not a crime. It is a mother's love. Judge Kerrigan was unmoved. Thank you for the editorial. Counsel, I am, however, far more interested in the evidence. Mr. Pike, call your first witness. We call Lina Ortiz, Harold said. Lina walked to the stand. She was a ghost. She was pale, her hands visibly trembling. She did not look at Evan. She looked at the judge as if she were a drowning woman looking at a life raft. Harold was kind, his voice gentle. Mrs. Ortiz, I'd like to direct your attention to the evening of October 16th, the night before this new will was signed. Do you recall that evening? Yes, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Could you tell the court what you observed? Evan, he was in the den, with Mildred, your mom. He had yellow legal pads. He was rehearsing with her. A low murmur went through the few observers. Evan's lawyer shot to his feet. Objection! This is speculation. Relevance? It is highly relevant, Your Honor, Harold said calmly. It goes directly to the heart of the testator's state of mind. Overruled, Judge Kerrigan said, her eyes fixed on Lina. Continue, Mrs. Ortiz. He was feeding her lines, Lina said, gaining a small, trembling bit of strength. He told her, Mom, the lawyer is going to ask you these things. Just do what we practiced. He told her to say she was stressed. He told her, if he asks about the money, just say it's too much for you, that I handle it. He told her, if he asks about Angela, just say she's strong. She's got her own life. She's fine. And he made her say it, over and over. He said, just nod, Mom, just nod, and say it's for the family. We just need to get this done. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. I looked at Evan. His face was a mask of purple rage. The next witness was Dr. Finch, the new therapist. His testimony was clinical, objective, and utterly devastating. Mrs. Ortiz presents no cognitive decline, he said, reading from his notes. However, she displays one of the most extreme cases of conflict-avoidant anxiety I have treated. She is highly suggestible and will almost always default to the path of least resistance to de-escalate a perceived confrontation. She is profoundly susceptible to influence from a strong, authoritative, or aggressive voice, particularly one she views as a protector. In your professional opinion, Doctor, Harold asked, would she be capable of resisting a son who was telling her what to sign? Objection! Evan's lawyer screamed. I'll rephrase, Harold said. Would she find it stressful to contradict him? She would find it almost impossible, Dr. Finch replied. Then, Harold, he submitted his own sworn affidavit and then took the stand to be questioned by his partner. On October 17th, did you request a private consultation with your client, Mildred Ortiz? Yes, Harold said, his face grim. I requested it twice. And what was the response? Mr. Evan Ortiz, who had paid for the consultation, refused to leave the room. He stated I was agitating his mother. When I insisted, he threatened to find a new lawyer. And what did you note in your file at that time? I noted, Harold said, his voice ringing with distaste. that there were significant red flags, and that I was proceeding against my better judgment at the insistence of the beneficiary. Then came the audio. The transcript from the Maple and Mint was projected on a screen, and the sound file was played over the courtroom speakers. We all sat in the polished wooden room and listened to the clatter of forks and the low hum of a cafe. We heard my voice, calm and measured, and then we heard Evan's, crashing into the conversation, loud and full of righteous fury. "Mom signed the new will exactly like I planned." The sound of his voice, making that declaration, was like a physical blow. It was so loud. And then, following it, my mother's small, thin, confused voice, a sound that made me feel sick. "Planned? Evan, what plan?" Evan's lawyer had his head in his hands. He didn't even bother to object. Harold's partner introduced the final piece of evidence. "Your Honor, an email from Mr. Ortiz to his mortgage broker, dated October 18th, the day after the will was signed." "Objection," Evan's lawyer yelped, a reflexive, tired sound. "Privacy. Irrelevant. It speaks directly to motive and premeditation. Counsel," Judge Kerrigan said, her patience clearly gone. "I'll allow it. Overruled." The email flashed onto the screen, a monument to his greed. "It's done. The new will is executed and locked in. She's solid. I want to close on the home equity loan before Thanksgiving. Let's get this done fast, so there's no time for anyone to get jumpy or ask questions. Need to pull out the first $150,000 immediately." Evan looked like he had been punched. He was staring at the screen, at his own words, as if he couldn't believe they had followed him here. The final witness was my mother. She was led to the stand by a bailiff, and she looked, for the first time in my life, truly ancient. She was a wisp, a small, terrified creature. Her new lawyer, the expensive one Evan had hired for her, approached her with a voice like a funeral director. "Mildred," he said, "we've heard a lot today, a lot of noise. Let's clear the air. You love your children, don't you?" "Yes," she whispered, her hands twisting in her lap. "And you? You were worried about Evan. He has a family. He has needs. You just wanted to help him, didn't you?" He has a family," she agreed, a rote line. "And Angela, she's strong, isn't she? Independent?" "Oh, yes," my mother said, looking at me, her eyes pleading. "Always. Angela is so strong, so independent. She never needed me." "So when you signed that new will," her lawyer said, moving in for the kill, "you were simply balancing the scales? You were acting as a mother, correct? It was your choice." This was the moment. She could have saved him. She could have lied. She could have said, "Yes, it was my choice." She looked at her lawyer. She looked at Evan, whose eyes were boring into her, willing her to say the right thing. She looked at me, my face a mask of neutrality. And she broke. Her face crumpled, not in a single expression, but in 1,000 small, collapsing failures. I, she stammered, her voice a thin, reedy sound. I don't remember. I was just so tired. He said, everyone was. It's just so much. The money. It's so much stress. I just want peace," she said, the tears finally coming. "I just want it to be quiet. Please, I'm just so tired." It was not a cry. It was a sigh that had been held in for 30 years, a long, shuddering exhalation of weakness and fear. It was the sound of a life of capitulation. "No further questions," her lawyer mumbled, backing away from the stand as if she were radioactive. Judge Kerrigan looked at the clock. "The court will take a 15-minute recess before closing arguments." The gavel cracked. I didn't move. I watched them lead my mother, sobbing. From the room, I watched Evan, his face white, get pulled into a conference room by his lawyer. I was alone in the courtroom, just me and the quiet. I stood, my legs stiff, I walked out into the hallway, my heels clicking on the tile. I just needed to breathe air that wasn't thick with lies and varnish. I stopped at the end of the hall, in front of a large, drab bulletin board. It was covered in public notices, jury duty information, and in the center, a poster, a plain, black and white flyer about the probate system. At the top, in bold, sans serif font, it read, "Probate is about intent." I stared at the word, intent. It wasn't about love. It wasn't about fairness. It wasn't about good reasons or strength or need. It wasn't about who had children and who had an empty apartment. It wasn't about who was loud and who was quiet. It was about intent. The entire legal question was not, what did my mother feel? It was, what did she plan? And every single piece of evidence, from Harold's notes to Lena's affidavit, from the therapist's report to the Maple and Mint audio, proved one simple, unassailable fact. My mother had no plan. Evan had a plan. I felt a sudden, glacial calm. This was not revenge. This was not a family drama. This was not, as Evan's lawyer had said, a daughter, angry she didn't get what she was owed. This was a correction. I was a project manager. I had been presented with a fraudulent scope of work. I had identified the procedural failures, the bad data, and the malicious actor who had derailed the project for his own gain. I was not here to punish. I was here to fix the file. I was here to restore the original, valid timeline. I took a deep breath, the anger and the hurt, which had been a fire in my chest for weeks, simply went out. All that was left was the objective. I turned, my spine like steel, and walked back into the courtroom to hear the end. Closing arguments were a formality. Harold was precise, summarizing the evidence as a clear, unassailable timeline of coercion. Evan's lawyer was loud, focusing on emotion, repeating the words family and love and independence as if they were shields. But they were just words, and we had the data. We had the audio, the emails, the bank statements, and the affidavits. Judge Kerrigan listened, her face impassive. When they were finished, she did not recess to deliberate. She did not take a day, or even an hour. She folded her hands, looked down at the mountain of evidence, and then looked up, her gaze passing over all of us. In the matter of the estate of Mildred Ortiz, she began, her voice cutting through the silent, heavy air of the courtroom. This court has heard extensive and, frankly, disturbing testimony. It is the finding of this court that the will dated October 17th, she held up the document, is the product not of the testator's intent, but of a textbook case of undue influence. Evan's lawyer made a small, strangled sound. The evidence is overwhelming, Judge Kerrigan continued, her voice devoid of all emotion, a pure instrument of the law. We have a highly susceptible testator. We have a beneficiary, Mr. Evan Ortiz, who not only had a confidential relationship but a clear, documented financial motive. We have his own, recorded words admitting to a plan his mother was unaware of. We have his own email, demonstrating his intent to leverage the assets of an estate he had procured through coercion, before his mother had even passed. She looked directly at Evan. The behavior of Mr. Ortiz, in this court's opinion, was not care. It was a predatory and calculated financial campaign. Therefore, she said, and her gavel was in her hand, it is the order of this court. The will dated October 17th is declared null and void. It is invalid. The petition to admit the prior, validly executed, will from 16 months ago is granted. That will, which divides the estate in 3 equal shares, is the controlling document. I let out a breath I'd been holding for my entire adult life. It was a slow, quiet, shuddering exhale. Furthermore, the judge added, her eyes now on my mother, who looked small and lost, this court is issuing a binding order. Any future changes to the estate plan of Mildred Ortiz must be conducted with the presence of independent, court-appointed counsel. Neither Mr. Ortiz, Ms. Collins, nor Ms. Angela Ortiz she nodded to me, are to be present in the room during any consultation or signing. This is to ensure that Mrs. Ortiz's true intent is protected, not just from her children, but for her children. She brought the gavel down. The sound was not a bang. It was a sharp, clean crack, like a bone setting, like a lock clicking into place. The spell was broken. Evan's lawyer was already shuffling his papers, his face grim, his job over. He knew a losing case when he saw one. Evan did not. He shot to his feet, his chair scraping violently on the floor. His face was a mask of furious, disbelieving rage. "You can't do this!" he screamed. Not at the judge, but at me. He pointed a shaking finger. You did this. You, bitch! You destroyed this family. You took everything. That's my house." "Mr. Ortiz," the bailiff yelled, his hand on his sidearm, "you will be silent." But Evan was beyond reason. He was a cornered animal. He stormed up the aisle, shoving past his lawyer, and burst through the heavy wooden doors into the hallway. The doors swung shut, and we could still hear him, a muffled, primal roar of "No!" followed by the sound of a fist hitting a wall. It was over. Mara, on the bench behind me, made a small, wounded sound, like an animal. She didn't get up. She just sat there, put her head in her hands, and began to weep, her shoulders shaking. She wasn't weeping for me, or for justice. She was weeping for the end of the world she knew, the end of the good reasons. Harold Pike touched my arm. He looked 10 years younger. "Angela," he said, a smile on his face. "We did it." "Thank you, Harold," I said. "You did." I stood up. I was the last one left. My family was a ruin. Scattered in the hallway and weeping on the benches, I felt nothing, just the deep, quiet calm of a project completed. I walked out of the courtroom. Evan was at the far end of the hall, near the elevators, being given a warning by 2 bailiffs. Mara was still on the bench, a puddle of grief. And then, my mother was in front of me. She had been waiting. She had been dismissed from the stand and had waited, hidden, for the verdict. She stepped out from a small alcove, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. "Angela," she whispered. I stopped. I had nothing left to say to her. "Angela, I need to." She was twisting her hands, just as she had on the stand. I wanted to say, "I am so sorry." I just looked at her. "I am sorry," she said, and this time, the tears were real. "I am sorry for what I called you, that day, on the phone, when I said you were selfish." I said nothing. You aren't," she stammered, the words costing her everything. "You were the only one who was never selfish. I was the one. I was so afraid, Angela, for so long, just scared. I was scared of being old. I was scared of being alone. And Evan is so loud. He was always the loudest, the one who needed the most, who took the most air. And I clung to him. I clung to the loudest one, because I was so terrified of being abandoned. It was the most honest thing she had ever said to me. It was a confession, not of malice, but of a profound, lifetime failure of character. I could have said, "It's too late." I could have said, "You let him do it." I could have said, "That doesn't fix anything," but I didn't. I just nodded, a single, short acknowledgement. I had been seen. The truth had been spoken. "Mom," I said, and my voice was firm. The new boundary. The judge was right. From now on, you will have independent counsel, a lawyer who is not Harold, who is not Evans, who is just for you. And when you are ready to talk to that person, and only when you are ready, you can call me. I will be in the room, not to influence, just to listen, to make sure you are not alone. That's all." She looked at me, her eyes wide, as if she was seeing me for the first time, not the strong one, not the convenient one, just The one who was left. The one who was still standing. She nodded. A tiny, terrified gesture. I walked away from her. I walked past Mara, who was still weeping. I walked past Evan, who was now leaning against the wall, defeated, his face in his hands. Harold was waiting for me by the elevators, holding his old-fashioned, overstuffed briefcase. "A good day's work, Angela," he said, smiling. He fumbled with the latch on his case. "Oh, before I forget, we found this when we were pulling the file for the original will, the 16-month-old one. It was tucked into the back of your mother's old file, from your grandmother's estate, years ago, I believe. I believe it belongs to you." He handed me a small, cream-colored envelope. It was old, the paper thick and soft. My name was on the front, written in a spidery, elegant, old-world script. It was my grandmother's handwriting. I looked at Harold, confused. "She's been gone for 10 years. It was in her file, with her will," Harold said. "Attached to a note about her personal effects. I think you were meant to have it, now." I took the elevator down to the lobby, alone. I sat on a hard wooden bench near the main doors. I slit the envelope open with my fingernail. Inside was a single, folded piece of notepaper. It was not a long letter. It was just a few lines. "My dearest Angela, I am leaving the cherrywood tables to you. Your mother will want to give them to Evan, because he is the boy. Your sister will want them, because she is the oldest. But they are for you. They are for the only grandchild I have who knows how to say no. They are for the one who knows her own mind. The others are just noise. You are the one who is strong enough to be quiet. Don't you ever forget that." I closed my eyes. I held the note to my chest. I had not cried when I was uninvited. I had not cried when I read the will. I had not cried when I saw the spreadsheet, or when my brother screamed at me in the courtroom. But I was crying now. Sitting in the lobby of the Toledo probate court, I was crying because she had seen me, my grandmother, 10 years gone. She had seen me, not as convenient, not as a buffer. She had seen my no not as a flaw, but as a virtue. It was not for being good. It was for setting a boundary. I drove home to Columbus. The sky was the same, flat, Ohio gray, but it felt different. I walked into my apartment. The first thing I saw was the refrigerator. There was still a small, pink sticky note on it, an old one, from 3 months ago. "Call Mara. Babysit Liam." I walked over to it. I pulled the small pink square off the stainless steel. I looked at it. The life I used to have. The default sacrifice. I crumpled it in my fist and I dropped it into the recycling bin. I took out a new, clean yellow legal pad. I tore off a sheet. I took a black pen. I wrote, in my own clear project manager's script, "Weekend plan. Buy wood stain. Refinish grandmother's tables." I put it on the fridge. I sat down on my sofa. The apartment was quiet. My phone, which had been buzzing with alerts from Harold all day, was silent. And then, a single, new text message lit up the screen. It was from Lena. One sentence. I moved out. I closed my eyes. A crack in the wall, a door opening, a different life, starting for her, too. I put the phone down. The late afternoon sun, which had been hiding all day, finally broke through the gray Ohio clouds. A long, clean shaft of light cut across my living room, illuminating the small, dark, cherrywood end table by my sofa, the one Evan had been holding on to for years, the one Harold had made his lawyer retrieve from the Dayton house and deliver to my apartment last week. It was covered in juice rings and water stains. I walked over to it. I knelt on the floor. I put my hand on the wood, feeling the grain. It was solid. It was real. My grandmother had left it for me. I had a vision of my apartment, of the life I was building. I was done asking for a seat at a table that was built on my silence. I was done being the buffer. I was, finally, sitting at my own. I had built it. I had named it. And I was, at last, solid and sitting firmly. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Please let me know in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and give it some extra support by hitting that hype button. It really helps get these stories out to more people who need to hear them.